You guys are playing with arguably the greatest player to ever play. And excuse me when I say this, but y'all treat him like he ain't nothing. And I'm talking
Wow.
Isiah Thomas recently joined Run It Back on FanDuel TV, and what started as a normal conversation about basketball eras quickly turned into one of the most honest discussions we've heard in a long time. The host asked him about the so-called golden era of basketball. Some believe it's right now. Others swear it was the mid-'80s to early '90s. Isiah acknowledged that his era is often labeled the golden era, but then he flipped the entire conversation on its head in a way nobody expected.
OG, there's always a debate about the golden era of basketball. Some think it's right now, others think it was more your era, mid-'80s, early '90s. What's your take on that?
Our era is considered to be the golden era. This is what I don't understand about your era, right?
So here's the real question. Are fans protecting history, or are they afraid to admit they're witnessing something greater?
Instead of pubbing y'all era up, y'all go back and say our era was the greatest. Oh, Michael Jordan was the greatest. Nobody could ever be greater than Michael Jordan, right? Okay, and then you turn around, but in your era, LeBron James sitting there, he holding every single basketball record. I mean, every single one of them.
He said the part that confuses him isn't how people praise the past, it's how today's generation talks about its own era. According to Isiah, modern players and fans are competing alongside arguably the greatest basketball player ever, yet they treat him like he's nothing special. Instead of lifting up their own era, they constantly go backward, saying the old days were better and Michael Jordan was untouchable. And that's where the contradiction starts.
You're looking at a Kevin Durant and you're looking at a Steph Curry, but then when y'all say who the greatest, y'all talk about the guy that gave you some shoes and, gave you some warm-ups.
LeBron James is sitting right there, still playing, still dominating, still rewriting the record books in real time. Yet every time the GOAT conversation comes up, people rush to dismiss him. Isiah's point was simple but uncomfortable. Why would a generation downplay the greatest player they are actually witnessing while over-celebrating a past they didn't even experience firsthand?
I'm an MJ person, but Isiah, I'm 50 years old. That's what made me love basketball was Michael Jordan. I'm not just going to change my mind. He could be second.
Then Isiah went straight to the evidence, and this is where the argument gets difficult to ignore. In almost every sport on the planet, greatness is eventually measured by records. Track and field, tennis, football, baseball, all of them rely on numbers, longevity, and dominance over time. The greatest athletes usually hold the most records. That's how history separates legends from everyone else.
Arguably the best players or athletes in those sports, they hold the world records. I know we talk about Jordan, but he leads in no statistical basketball category. But yet we say there's an argument about him being the best. But then when you look at Kareem and you look at LeBron, those guys lead in several statistical categories. But yet we say somebody else is better. And I'm just giving you the evidence.
When you apply that same logic to basketball, things get interesting. Michael Jordan does not lead any major statistical category in NBA history. Not points, not assists, not rebounds, not longevity-based metrics. Yet he's widely called the greatest. Meanwhile, LeBron James leads or ranks near the top in nearly every meaningful statistical category the game has to offer. All-time scoring leader, top tier in assists, top tier in rebounds, playoff dominance across decades, still productive deep into his career. The gap in evidence is impossible to ignore.
15 years from now, when the next generation come along and they talk about how great LeBron James was and how great Kevin Durant was and Steph Curry was, it won't even be a conversation or a debate. Your generation right now is the only, y'all say we hating on y'all hating on yourself.
Isiah wasn't attacking Jordan. He was questioning why evidence suddenly stops mattering when MJ enters the conversation. If records define greatness everywhere else, why does basketball suddenly become emotional instead of factual? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar faced the same treatment for years, and only with time did people begin to appreciate how dominant his resume truly was. Isiah believes LeBron is going through that same process right now.
I see Steph Curry, Steph Cross shoot past court, I'm excited.
I still love it.
I see Kyrie, do his thing, I get excited, right? When
I love Kevin Durant. It's like one of my favorite dudes to watch ever.
Yeah, but now I'm not excited by everybody.
No.
There's some people that they lie on and say they good and they all right.
See, that's a whole other show.
Preach.
One reason LeBron's era is judged so harshly is because the standards keep changing. When Jordan played, rings were everything. Context didn't matter. Finals losses weren't dissected. Team construction wasn't analyzed. But with LeBron, everything counts against him. Finals losses, teammate quality, coaching decisions, front office failures, all of it gets piled onto his legacy. LeBron is punished for staying too long, for doing too much, and for carrying more responsibility than any superstar before him. If he had retired earlier, his resume might look cleaner to people obsessed with perfection. But instead, he stayed long enough to expose how flawed legacy arguments really are. He didn't protect his myth, he chased greatness. The host pushed back during the conversation, admitting that he's an MJ guy. He's 50 years old. Michael Jordan is the reason he fell in love with basketball. And that honesty might be the most important part of this entire debate. For many fans, MJ isn't just a player. He's nostalgia, he's childhood, he's emotion, and those feelings are powerful. Isiah didn't dismiss that, but he made it clear that being a historian of the game means separating emotion from evidence. Loving Jordan doesn't mean ignoring what LeBron has accomplished. And pretending LeBron's resume doesn't rival or surpass Jordan's in many areas isn't loyalty, it's denial. One of Isiah's strongest points was about how this debate will age. He said that 15 or 20 years from now, the conversation will look completely different. The next generation won't have emotional attachments to Jordan. They won't remember the commercials, the shoes, or the cultural moment. They'll look at numbers, dominance, versatility, and longevity. And when they do, LeBron's name will stand out in a way that's impossible to debate. Isiah also called out how modern players and fans underrate their own era. When people list their top 10 players of all time, they usually stack it with names from the 80s and 90s. Jordan, Magic, Bird, Kareem, Hakeem. Meanwhile, players like LeBron, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and Giannis are either minimized or left out entirely. That doesn't make sense. The math doesn't add up. Either today's era is historically great, or people are refusing to give it credit. And LeBron didn't just excel on the court, he redefined leadership, longevity, and what it means to be the centerpiece of a franchise for 2 decades. LeBron's biggest problem might be that he does everything. He scores, passes, rebounds, defends, leads, adapts, and evolves. He's not just a scorer like Jordan, he's an entire system. And systems are harder to romanticize because they expose flaws in simple narratives. This debate always pretends to be about basketball, but it's really about identity. It's about who represents your era, who made you fall in love with the game, and whose greatness feels personal. Isiah Thomas isn't saying Michael Jordan wasn't great. He's saying refusing to acknowledge LeBron's greatness is dishonest, and history doesn't reward dishonesty. You don't have to stop loving MJ. You don't have to erase the 90s. You don't have to rewrite history, but you do have to be honest. LeBron James didn't just play basketball. He redefined what greatness looks like over time. And whether people admit it right now or not, the future already sees it clearly. When basketball history is written 20 years from now, the question won't be who people felt was the greatest. It will be who the evidence proves it was. And that answer is getting harder to argue against every single season LeBron James steps on the court. And this is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable for people who rely on shortcuts instead of substance. Because once you strip away nostalgia, branding, and highlight montages burned into memory, what you're left with is body of work. Night after night, season after season, era after era. LeBron's resume doesn't depend on myth, it survives scrutiny. Think about how unprecedented his career actually is. LeBron entered the league straight out of high school and immediately carried expectations no player had ever faced. He wasn't allowed to grow quietly. Every failure was magnified, every loss was dissected, and yet, instead of shrinking under that pressure, he expanded his game year after year. Different teammates, different coaches, different systems, same results. Contention, dominance, relevance. There has never been a superstar whose prime stretched this long without interruption. Most legends burn bright and fade. LeBron has evolved. When athleticism declined, skill took over. When speed faded, IQ sharpened. When scoring wasn't enough, playmaking became elite. That adaptability isn't accidental. It's intelligence, discipline, and an obsession with longevity the league had never seen before. And this is where comparisons to Jordan quietly fall apart. Jordan's greatness is real, but it exists inside a fixed window. LeBron's greatness exists across time. Different rule changes, different defensive schemes, different styles of play, different generations of opponents. He's dominated big men, wings, small ball lineups, and analytics-driven systems alike. The league changed, and he stayed on top of it. Another part of the resistance comes from how LeBron refuses to fit into a clean, heroic narrative. He speaks his mind. He controls his career. He leaves teams. He builds rosters. He uses his power. That makes people uncomfortable. Jordan was easier to package. LeBron is harder to contain. And history tends to punish those who challenge tradition before eventually validating them. Even the criticism itself proves Isiah's point. No other player in history has had greatness held against him this aggressively. LeBron is criticized for making the finals too often, for carrying bad teams too far, for losing to dynasties, for playing too long, for being too versatile. The goalposts don't just move, they sprint. What's ironic is that many of the arguments used against LeBron today sound exactly like the ones used against Kareem decades ago. Too quiet, too methodical, too dominant for too long, not flashy enough, not emotional enough. And yet now, Kareem's resume is untouchable. The same reevaluation is already happening with LeBron, just in real time. There's also a generational insecurity that fuels this debate. If LeBron is acknowledged as the greatest, it forces people to accept that the best basketball might not belong to their childhood. That realization is hard. Sports memories are personal. They're tied to identity. And admitting someone surpassed your hero can feel like admitting time passed you by. Isiah Thomas understands that better than most. He lived through it. He watched his own era get overshadowed. And that's why his comments carry weight. He's not protecting a legacy. He's observing patterns. He's seen how greatness is resisted before it's accepted, and he knows how history eventually corrects emotional bias. LeBron's story isn't finished, and that's part of the problem for his critics. As long as he's still playing, they can pretend the verdict is out. But every season adds more evidence, more records, more context, more separation. And the longer he lasts, the weaker the arguments against him become. Eventually, debates don't end with opinions, they end with silence. Silence when there's nothing left to argue. Silence when the numbers speak for themselves. Silence when future fans look back and wonder why this was ever controversial in the first place. Michael Jordan will always be iconic. That will never change. But icon and greatest are not the same word. One lives in memory, the other lives in evidence. And as Isiah Thomas made clear, history doesn't bend for nostalgia. It responds to truth. LeBron James didn't ask to be crowned. He just kept playing. And sometimes, the loudest legacy is built without ever needing to say a word.